In the year 2147, humanity had spread far beyond Earth. They had built colonies on distant planets and moons, connected by ships that traveled through the stars. One of these colonies was called New Haven. It was a quiet place, full of farmers, teachers, and families who wanted to live peacefully away from the crowded cities of Earth. The colony was led by Governor Laura Hayes, a kind but strong woman, and her advisor Daniel Carter, who always had a plan for everything. New Haven seemed like the perfect place to start a new life. People worked hard during the day and spent their evenings with friends and family. Children played in open fields under two suns, and everyone felt safe. But safety is never guaranteed in a universe filled with unknown dangers. One morning, as the twin suns rose over the horizon, something changed. A strange ship appeared in the sky. It wasn't one of theirs. At first, people thought it might be traders or explorers visiting from another system. But soon, more ships came, hundreds of them. These ships were sleek and dark, shaped like blades cutting through the clouds. The Chrythans had arrived. No one knew much about the Chrythans. They were an alien species, rarely seen and even less understood. Their technology was far ahead of anything humans had ever created, and they didn't come to talk. Without warning, the Chrythan ships unleashed beams of energy that tore through buildings, fields, and homes. Explosions lit up the sky, turning the peaceful colony into a nightmare. Laura Hayes tried to organize an evacuation, but there was no time. The attacks were too fast, too brutal. Families scrambled to escape, but many didn't make it. Among those who survived were Jason Brooks, a farmer who had been working in his field when the attack began, and Emily Dawson, a school teacher who had been teaching her students just moments before chaos erupted. Jason grabbed his tools and ran toward the sound of screaming. He found a group of children hiding in a ditch near his farm. Some were hurt, others crying uncontrollably. With no weapons to defend himself, he used his body to shield them as debris rained down around them. When the attack paused briefly, he led the children to an old shuttle hidden in a nearby forest. Emily wasn't so lucky. She watched helplessly as her school collapsed under enemy fire. Her heart broke as she saw some of her students trapped inside. Gathering her courage, she ran back into the burning building to save whoever she could. By the time she made it out, coughing and covered in ash, only a handful of survivors followed her. Together, they joined Jason at the shuttle. As the Chrythan ships continued their assault, the remaining colonists boarded whatever vessels they could find. The shuttles launched into space, leaving behind the ruins of New Haven. From orbit, the survivors looked down at their once beautiful home, now reduced to smoke and rubble. Later, the Chrythans broadcast a message across human-controlled space. They claimed that humanity's expansion threatened their survival. They said they had acted to protect themselves. But the survivors knew the truth. This wasn't self-defense. It was genocide. Jason clenched his fists as he stared at the stars. His mind burned with questions. Why did this happen? What would happen next? And most importantly, how could humanity fight back against such powerful enemies? For now, all they could do was grieve and prepare. Because if the Chrythans thought humanity would roll over and die, they were wrong. Very wrong. The news of New Haven's destruction spread quickly across human-controlled space. At first, many refused to believe it. How could an entire colony vanish overnight? But as footage from the survivors' shuttles reached Earth and other colonies, disbelief turned into shock, and then rage. Governor Laura Hayes, her face pale but determined, stood before a crowd of leaders on the orbital station Elysium. She recounted what had happened in a voice that trembled with pain but carried undeniable strength. They didn't just attack us, she said. They wiped out men, women, and children without mercy. They left no survivors because they wanted none. The room fell silent as her words sank in. Admiral Rachel Monroe, commander of Earth's fleet, stepped forward next. Her sharp eyes scanned the room, meeting the gaze of every leader present. This isn't just an attack on New Haven, she said firmly. It's an attack on all of us. If we don't respond, they'll come for more. And when they do, we won't be ready." Rachel's speech sent a shiver through the assembly. For years, humanity had focused on exploration and trade, not war. Their fleets were small, their weapons outdated compared to the Crithans. But now, survival depended on change. Ethan Grayson, a scientist known for his quiet demeanor and brilliant mind, offered a glimmer of hope. He unveiled a prototype weapon system he called Phoenix. It was designed to disrupt enemy shields and power sources using quantum energy, a technology so advanced that even Ethan admitted it wasn't fully tested. Still, it represented humanity's best chance at fighting back. "We can't match their numbers or firepower directly," Ethan explained. "But Phoenix gives us a way to level the playing field. With enough time, we can adapt it for our ships and turn the tide." While the leaders debated strategy, Jason Brooks and Emily Dawson became symbols of resilience. Their stories of survival inspired millions. Jason, once just a farmer, spoke about risking his life to save children during the attack. Emily, still haunted by the faces of her students, shared how she fought to keep them alive despite overwhelming odds. Together, they reminded everyone what was at stake, not just territory or resources, but the future of humanity itself. Laura Hayes saw the potential in Jason and Emily. She asked them to join Task Force Redemption, a new unit dedicated to striking back against the Crithans. Though neither had military training, both agreed immediately. "If this is what it takes to make sure no one else suffers like we did," Jason said, "then I'm in." Meanwhile, Marcus Lane, a pilot whose family had been killed in the attack, volunteered to lead reconnaissance missions. His skills in the cockpit were unmatched, and his hatred for the Crithans burned brighter than anyone else's. When Rachel assigned him to work with Jason and Emily, he hesitated at first. Civilians weren't soldiers, after all. But seeing their determination changed his mind. Back on Elysium, Ethan worked tirelessly to improve Phoenix. Late nights blurred into early mornings as he fine-tuned the system, running simulations and making adjustments based on feedback from engineers. The pressure was immense, but Ethan stayed focused. Failure wasn't an option, not when so many lives depended on his invention. As humanity prepared for war, factories across the colonies shifted into overdrive. Ships, weapons, and supplies poured out day and night. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers, eager to fight for their species' survival. Teachers, farmers, doctors, all walks of life joined the effort. The Crithans, however, remained confident. They believed humanity too weak and divided to mount a serious counterattack. What they failed to understand was that their genocide had awakened something within humans, a fierce unity born of grief and anger. And soon, they would learn just how dangerous that could be. Humanity moved quickly, faster than anyone thought possible. Factories that once built farming equipment or mining tools now churned out weapons and ships around the clock. People worked in shifts, day and night, driven by a shared purpose. The loss of New Haven had ignited a fire in everyone, a determination to protect what was left and ensure no one else would suffer the same fate. Governor Laura Hayes became the face of this new unity. She traveled between colonies, rallying people with her speeches. "We are not just fighting for revenge," she told crowds gathered on distant planets. "We are fighting for our children, for our future. We will stand together, or we will fall apart." Her words resonated deeply, inspiring millions to join the war effort. At the heart of humanity's preparations was Admiral Rachel Monroe, who led Earth's fleet with unwavering resolve. Under her command, old ships were upgraded, and new ones rolled off assembly lines almost daily. Pilots trained tirelessly, learning how to use the experimental Phoenix system Ethan Grayson had developed. Though untested in real combat, Phoenix gave them hope, a chance to fight back against the Crithans' superior technology. Ethan himself remained on Elysium, working nonstop to refine his invention. He barely slept, surviving on coffee and short naps at his desk. Engineers tested Phoenix repeatedly, tweaking its settings to make it more reliable. Despite the pressure, Ethan refused to give up. If this works, he told his team one late night, it could save billions of lives. Task Force Redemption grew stronger with each passing day. Marcus Lane, the skilled pilot, took charge of training Jason Brooks and Emily Dawson. At first, Jason struggled with the controls of a fighter ship. He'd never flown anything before, but Marcus was patient. "You've got guts," Marcus said after watching Jason crash yet another simulation. "Now let's teach you how to aim." Emily focused on supporting the team in other ways. Though she didn't have combat skills, she proved invaluable as a strategist. Her calm demeanor helped keep everyone grounded during tense planning sessions. When tensions ran high, she reminded them why they were fighting. "We're doing this for New Haven," she said softly. "For every life they took." As humanity prepared, the Crithans grew overconfident. Believing humans too weak to retaliate, they expanded their territory further into human space. Their leaders dismissed reports of increased activity among human colonies, convinced it was nothing more than panic. They were wrong. Rachel decided it was time to strike. Task Force Redemption launched its first mission, an assault on a small Crithan outpost near the edge of human-controlled space. The goal was simple: test Phoenix in battle and gather intelligence about Crithan defenses. The attack began under cover of darkness. Marcus led the charge, guiding his squadron through asteroid fields to avoid detection. Jason flew alongside him, his hands gripping the controls tightly. For the first time, he felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. If he failed, others might die. When they reached the outpost, Phoenix proved its worth. The quantum energy disrupted the Crithan's shields, leaving them vulnerable. Ground troops stormed the facility, securing vital data about Crithan technology. But the victory came at a cost. Several ships were lost, and many lives sacrificed. Back aboard the flagship, Jason sat quietly, replaying the battle in his mind. He had fired his weapons for the first time, watched enemy ships explode. It wasn't glory, it was brutal and messy. Beside him, Emily tended to wounded soldiers, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. Though the mission succeeded, Rachel knew the road ahead would be long and difficult. Humanity had taken its first step toward vengeance, but the Crithans wouldn't back down easily. Still, as she looked at her crew, their faces tired but resolute, she felt a spark of hope. They were ready to fight, and they weren't going to stop until justice was served. The success of the first mission gave humanity a much-needed boost. Task Force Redemption had proven that Phoenix could work in battle, and the data they collected from the Crithan outpost was invaluable. Ethan Grayson studied it closely, using the information to make Phoenix even stronger. But everyone knew this was only the beginning. The Crithans were still out there, and they wouldn't stop until humanity was wiped out, or they were. Admiral Rachel Monroe called a meeting aboard the flagship to plan the next phase of the war. "We've shown them we can hit back," she said, her voice firm. "Now it's time to show them we're not afraid to keep hitting." She outlined a series of coordinated strikes on key Crithan installations. The goal was to cripple their supply lines and weaken their defenses. Marcus Lane would lead one of these missions. He gathered his team, including Jason Brooks and Emily Dawson, to go over the details. "This isn't going to be easy," Marcus warned. "The Crithans will be expecting us this time. We'll need to move fast and stay sharp." Jason nodded, feeling a mix of nerves and determination. Since his first mission, he trained harder than ever. Flying no longer felt foreign. He was starting to understand the rhythms of combat. Emily, too, had found her place. Though she wasn't a fighter, her ability to think quickly under pressure made her an asset. She carried medical supplies and helped patch up wounded soldiers when things went wrong. The target was a massive Crithan weapons factory orbiting a gas giant. If humanity could destroy it, they'd cut off a major source of the enemy's firepower. The plan was risky but straightforward. Disable the factory's shields with Phoenix, then send ground teams inside to plant explosives. When the day came, tension filled the air. Pilots climbed into their ships, checking systems one last time. Marcus gave Jason a quick nod as they prepared to launch. "Stay close," he said, "and don't do anything stupid." The attack began with precision. Marcus led the squadron straight at the factory, dodging enemy fire as they approached. When they were in range, Phoenix activated. Beams of quantum energy lashed out, tearing through the Crython's shields. For a moment, everything seemed to go according to plan. But the Crythons were ready. Reinforcements arrived faster than expected, swarming the human fleet. Explosions lit up space as ships clashed in chaotic dogfights. Jason struggled to keep up, his heart pounding as enemy fighters closed in. Just when it seemed like he might be overwhelmed, Marcus swooped in, blasting the attackers away. "Thanks," Jason muttered, breathing heavily. On the ground, the mission was just as intense. Teams fought their way through corridors filled with Crython soldiers, planting explosives as they went. Emily stayed close to the action, treating injuries whenever she could. At one point, a Crython soldier cornered her in a narrow hallway. Before she could react, Jason appeared, firing his weapon and driving the alien back. "You okay?" he asked, helping her to her feet. "Yeah," Emily replied, though her hands shook. "Let's finish this." Finally, the explosives were set. The ground team retreated to their ship as the countdown began. Outside, Marcus and Jason covered their escape, fending off waves of enemies. When the factory exploded in a blinding flash, cheers erupted across the fleet. But the victory came at a cost. Several ships were lost, and many lives sacrificed. As the survivors regrouped, Rachel looked at the damage reports. Her expression was grim but resolute. They had won this battle. But the war was far from over. Back on Elysium, Ethan worked tirelessly to improve Phoenix based on feedback from the mission. He knew humanity couldn't afford to lose momentum now. Every second counted. For Jason and Emily, the mission left scars, both physical and emotional, but it also strengthened their resolve. They had faced the Crythons head-on and survived, and they were ready to do it again. The victories kept coming, one after another. Humanity's forces grew stronger with each mission, their confidence rising as they pushed deeper into Crython territory. Task Force Redemption became a symbol of hope, their name whispered in colonies across the galaxy. But the war was far from over. The Crythons were desperate now, lashing out with everything they had. They knew humanity wasn't going to back down, and that terrified them. Ethan Grayson worked day and night on a new weapon, something even more powerful than Phoenix. He called it Reckoning. Unlike Phoenix, which targeted shields and power sources, Reckoning was a virus designed to infiltrate Crython technology. Once inside, it would spread like wildfire, disabling weapons, ships, and even entire bases. It was risky. There was no guarantee it would work, but Ethan believed it could turn the tide of the war. Rachel Monroe approved the plan immediately. "We need every advantage we can get," she said during a briefing aboard the flagship. "If Reckoning works, it'll give us the edge we've been looking for." She assigned Marcus Lane and his team to deploy the virus during their next mission. Jason Brooks and Emily Dawson prepared alongside Marcus, knowing the stakes were higher than ever. Jason had grown into a skilled pilot, his movements in combat smooth and precise. Emily had also found her place, not just as a medic, but as someone who kept the team grounded. Her calm voice reminded everyone why they were fighting: to protect humanity's future. The target this time was a massive Crython communications hub. If they could disable it, they'd cut off the enemy's ability to coordinate attacks across their territory. Deploying Reckoning there would amplify the impact. The mission began under cover of darkness. Marcus led the squadron toward the hub, dodging patrols and asteroid fields along the way. When they arrived, Phoenix activated, tearing through the Crython's defenses. Ground teams moved in quickly, planting devices loaded with Reckoning throughout the facility. Inside, the resistance was fierce. Crython soldiers poured into the corridors, forcing Jason, Emily, and the others to fight for every inch. At one point, Emily was pinned down by enemy fire, unable to move. Jason rushed to her side, firing wildly to keep the Crithans at bay. "You good?" he asked, pulling her up. "Yeah," Emily replied, though her hands shook. "Let's finish this." They planted the last device just as alarms blared throughout the facility. The Crithans had detected the intrusion and were scrambling to shut it down. Outside, Marcus covered their escape, blasting away enemies as the ground team raced back to their ship. When they were clear, Ethan activated Reckoning remotely. A wave of energy surged through the hub, spreading outward like ripples in water. Within moments, the facility went dark. Across nearby systems, Crithan ships and bases began shutting down, their systems overwhelmed by the virus. Back aboard the flagship, cheers erupted as reports came in. For the first time, humanity had struck a crippling blow against the Crithans. Rachel allowed herself a small smile, though her eyes remained heavy with the weight of what was still ahead. But the Crithans weren't done yet. Desperation made them dangerous. In a final gamble, they deployed their ultimate weapon, a colossal dreadnought capable of destroying entire planets. Its arrival near Earth sent shockwaves through humanity's ranks. Laura Hayes addressed the colonies, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her heart. "This is it," she said. "They've brought their worst against us. Now we must show them ours." Preparations began immediately. Earth's defenses were fortified, and fleets mobilized to meet the threat head-on. Marcus volunteered to lead a daring assault on the dreadnought itself, knowing the odds were slim. Jason and Emily joined him without hesitation. As they suited up for the mission, Jason looked at Emily. "We've made it this far," he said. "Whatever happens next, we face it together." Emily nodded, determination shining in her eyes. "For New Haven," she whispered. And so, humanity braced for its greatest challenge yet. The battle for Earth was about to begin. The Crithan dreadnought loomed in the sky like a shadow of death. Its size was unimaginable, larger than any ship humanity had ever faced. It hung above Earth, its weapons aimed at cities and oceans, ready to unleash destruction on a scale never seen before. But humanity wasn't going to let it happen, not without a fight. Admiral Rachel Monroe stood on the bridge of her flagship, staring at the massive enemy vessel through the viewport. She knew this battle would decide everything. If they failed, Earth would burn. If they succeeded, the Crithans might finally be forced to retreat. "We don't have a choice," she told her crew. "We win this, or we die trying." Marcus Lame led the assault team, his face set with grim determination. Jason Brooks and Emily Dawson were by his side, each carrying their own fears but refusing to let them show. They had trained for weeks, planning every detail of the mission. The goal was simple: destroy the dreadnought's core. Without it, the ship would collapse. But getting there wouldn't be easy. The attack began with humanity's fleet launching waves of fighters to distract the dreadnought's defenses. Explosions lit up space as ships clashed in chaotic battles. Marcus guided his squadron through the chaos, dodging enemy fire while leading them closer to the dreadnought. When they reached the hangar bay, he gave the signal. "Stay sharp," he said over the comms. This is where it gets ugly. Inside the dreadnought, the air was cold and filled with the hum of alien machinery. The corridors were dimly lit, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Crithan soldiers patrolled everywhere, their weapons ready. Jason, Emily, and the others moved carefully, sticking to the shadows as much as possible. At one point, they were ambushed. Crithan soldiers opened fire from both ends of a corridor, trapping them in the middle. Jason returned fire, his hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Emily stayed close, reloading weapons and offering support. Marcus took charge, shouting orders as they fought their way free. "This isn't going to get easier," Marcus said as they regrouped. "Keep moving." Finally, they reached the core chamber. It was a massive room filled with glowing energy conduits and pulsating machinery. In the center was the core itself, a swirling orb of light that seemed alive. Emily stared at it, her heart racing. "That's what we came for," she whispered. Jason planted explosives around the core, while Marcus and the others kept watch. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the corridor. Crithan reinforcements were coming. The destruction of the dreadnought was a turning point. The Crithans, once confident and unstoppable, were now on the defensive. Their greatest weapon was gone, and their forces were scattered. Humanity seized the opportunity, launching a final, massive campaign to end the war once and for all. Admiral Rachel Monroe led the charge, her fleet moving like a storm across Crithan territory. With Phoenix and Reckoning at their disposal, humanity's ships tore through enemy defenses. Task Force Redemption played a key role, striking at critical targets and weakening the Crithans' ability to fight back. Marcus Lane, Jason Brooks, and Emily Dawson fought side by side, their teamwork sharper than ever. Jason had grown into a skilled pilot, his confidence soaring with each mission. He no longer doubted himself, knowing he could hold his own in battle. Emily, too, had changed. She was no longer just a teacher or a medic. She was a fighter, someone who refused to give up even when the odds seemed impossible. Together, they pushed forward, driven by the memory of New Haven and everyone they had lost. The final battle took place near the Crithans' homeworld. It was a fortress planet, surrounded by layers of defense systems and guarded by what remained of their fleet. Humanity's forces gathered for one last assault, knowing this would decide the war. Rachel gave a speech before the attack, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "This is it," she said. "Today we settle this. Not just for revenge, for justice, for every life they took, for every colony they destroyed. We make them pay." The battle was fierce. Ships clashed in space, explosions lighting up the void like fireworks. Marcus led his squadron through the chaos, guiding them toward the planet's surface. Their mission was clear: destroy the Crithans' central command center, the heart of their operations. Without it, their empire would collapse. On the ground, Jason and Emily joined ground teams fighting their way through heavily defended bases. Every step was a struggle, every corridor a battleground. At one point, Emily found herself face to face with a Crithan soldier. Her hands trembled as she raised her weapon, but she didn't hesitate. She fired, knowing it was either her or them. Finally, they'd reached the command center. It was a towering structure, bristling with weapons and surrounded by troops. Marcus called for an airstrike to weaken its defenses, then led the charge inside. Jason planted explosives while Emily kept watch, her heart pounding as the countdown began. As the charges detonated, the building crumbled, sending shockwaves through the planet. The Crithans' control over their forces shattered, leaving them leaderless and disorganized. Humanity's fleet pressed the advantage, driving the enemy back until there was nowhere left for them to run. When the dust settled, the Crithans surrendered. Their leaders begged for mercy, claiming they had acted out of fear. But humanity wasn't moved. Laura Hayes spoke for everyone when she said, "You chose genocide. Now you live with the consequences." The Crithans' homeworld was quarantined, their species confined to a small part of the galaxy. Humanity declared that any attempt to harm them again would mean extinction. Back on Earth, people began to rebuild. Laura and Emily worked together to establish new colonies, ensuring they were stronger and safer than before. Jason returned to farming, finding peace in the simple life he had once known. Marcus stayed with the fleet, ready to defend humanity if needed. Ethan Grayson continued his work, using what he had learned to create technology that would protect humanity in the future. Rachel Monroe retired from active duty, spending her days mentoring the next generation of leaders. Though the scars of war remained, hope began to grow. Humanity had proven it could rise above tragedy, unite against impossible odds, and emerge victorious. As Laura looked up at the stars one night, she smiled faintly. "We've been through hell," she whispered, "but we're still here, and we'll keep going, together."